Hello, everyone. My name is Stacy Nell, and I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas African American Affairs Commission. Today, I'm thrilled to have mastered the technology and to bring my friend Lindsay Ford from the Voter Network to talk to us about voter engagement and how it's important for us to vote. Hello, Lindsay.
Hi, Stacy. I'm so glad to be back.
Yay! See, I wasn't even going to make reference to the fact that we tried this yesterday.
Oh, no, I was talking about last.
Oh, yeah. You know what? You're right. I should cover. So, yeah, but Lindsay has been back. She's been here twice already.
Uh-huh.
This is a third time. You are the first third-time person to come.
Yeah.
Thus, that's how deep I am a believer in the Voter Network.
Oh, I thought it was because I'm super compelling.
You know what? You are super compelling. I like you. So, it all works out. But okay, so today we're here to talk about the Voter Network. I guess I should ask you though, since it's lunch. What'd you have for lunch?
I had leftover. I had bought a rotisserie chicken at Costco, like you do. Yeah. You know, when they don't have them out and everybody hovers around there waiting for the new. I grabbed one last night, so I had some rotisserie chicken and some vegetables, and I reheated.
Man, it's healthy. It's healthy. So, yeah. I had some tomato pesto thing. So it was good. Gets the job done. The job done. Okay, but Lindsay Ford, for those of us who may not remember who Lindsay Ford is or who don't know who Lindsay Ford, allow me to introduce my friend Lindsay Ford. Lindsay Ford is the Executive Director of the Voter Network, a Kansas-based nonprofit organization aiming to increase participation in the electoral process as a strategy to improve healthy outcomes. Prior to serving at the Voter Network, Lindsay worked for the mayor of Kansas City, Kansas, where she oversaw policy and project management. She previously held roles in corporate community relations and with a number of political campaigns at the local, state, and federal levels.
Yeah.
At local, state, and federal levels. So thanks, Lindsay, for joining us. And you do have a slide presentation. This is fancy because the first two times you came on, we just gabbed with each other. But now we're big people now. So we have a voter slide presentation. Would you like that to come up?
Yeah, let's pull up the slide deck.
Let's do it.
I know it seems really professional, doesn't it? Although I just realized I showed up with an Alvin and the Chipmunks glass from 1984. So I like to balance. I like the balance here.
No shame.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Voter Network. Tell us about the Voter Network.
Yeah, I've been working at the Voter Network since 2018. You mentioned, Stacy, that I worked for the mayor of Kansas City, Kansas. One thing that I noticed leaving that role after the mayor I worked for lost his reelection campaign in 2017. One thing I noticed was that there were real disparities in who participated in local elections. And a lot of it kind of fell down by neighborhoods and frankly by race. And so you could see in Black and brown neighborhoods in downtown KCK that turnout was really low compared to some majority white neighborhoods in the western part of the city. And this is stuff I knew and had heard about because I had worked on political campaigns and around this stuff for years. But there was something about seeing that turnout in 2017 and really 20-30% disparities between neighborhoods and how they participated, that kind of shook me. And so I was looking for a new role kind of away from the work I'd been doing, in part, Stacey, because political candidates and political parties, to no fault of their own, because their goal is to win elections. I'm not faulting anybody for that, but that means they're often talking to people who already vote. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like there was some real work to be done talking to people who aren't already engaged and who need to be represented in political halls of power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's something that I try to impress upon people a lot, is that political campaigns, all campaigns, if it's an issue campaign or if it's a political campaign, if it's something where someone needs you to vote on something, the first stop for that campaign, that person, that issue, that group, whatever, is to look at who's voting.
Yeah.
That's it. And so for my community, for the Black community, what I hear often from the Black community is, well, I don't know why I should vote because they don't care about me. They don't do anything that would help me. And my response is always, but they know you're not going to vote them out. Mm-hmm. Right? Like if as a candidate, I know that this neighborhood, this block, whatever that neighborhood or block looks like, if I know that block has a good chance that they're not going to bother to vote, I'm not going to spend the money to reach out to them. So that's just in a nutshell.
Yeah, exactly. This is kind of an imperfect example. Also, I told you to start the slide deck, and then I just started talking.
I was like, and I'm like, oh, I can't see her. Let me make it
This is kind of an imperfect example, but if you run for office in Wyandotte County, for example, there's it's widely known that the Hmong community there votes, and that their vote is really impactful. And so candidates for office always meet with Hmong leadership while they're running for office. And I think about that. I saw that in some of the very early campaigns that I worked on, that there was always a big push to make sure you met with Hmong leadership and you showed up at the events they invited you to. And I think a lot of it was they had proved the point that they were voting, and that they were voting at really high rates. And so you're right. I think whether or not a politician or an elected official is doing it consciously or unconsciously, it's hard to ignore the fact that some folks are voting and some are not, and forget that and just be like widely available to everybody all the time, right?
Yeah. I mean, having run a campaign, though, I think it's a very conscious decision to reach out to people who are likely to vote for you. I don't know if it's done with malice.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't, again, having run a campaign or been in a campaign, it's not like I'm maliciously saying, well, I'm not going to talk to that block of people, that neighborhood. Yeah. But the simple truth is that every time a candidate or an issue campaign, right? So by issue, I mean, if there's a tax increase, or if there's a constitutional amendment, if there's like some issue it's not that Lindsay Ford's running for the president of the United States, but there's some issue that has a campaign behind it. Still, to get people to vote for that, the first stop is still, if it costs me money to reach out to these people, I'm going to reach out to people who are more likely going to vote.
Right. If you're running for school board, it's not like you're raising tens of thousands of dollars typically to run. And so you have a limited amount of time, a limited budget. And if only 15% of registered voters are going to vote, you're going to make sure that 15% know who you are.
Right.
And those 15% almost never include, by the way, young people, which is sad, because a school board, you would think, like, I don't know, 18-year-olds, school boards really impact some 18-year-olds, but 18-year-olds show up in local elections for school boards at like 3%. So why would a candidate go like talk to a high school class of graduating seniors?
Yeah, because we have to turn out. Okay, so now I stopped the tool, but then or the slide deck. So let's go back to that.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about who's actually turning out. We pulled these numbers for the 2022 election, and again, like these are issues I've been working on now for several years. But pulling the numbers for 2022, I think, show the problem really clear. At the Voter Network, we really want more people to turn out across the board. I want older people to turn out, younger people to turn out. I want more Republicans to turn out, more Democrats to turn out. But I think to do this, we have to start where the gap is widest and get closer to parity. And right now, we're not there. So if you scroll to the next slide, the census data that came out in 2021 after doing the 2020 census, it's not perfect, but one of the things they measure is the citizen voting age population, and then we can take registration numbers, which are also kind of I just want to preface this by saying this is kind of tricky math, because when you register to vote, you also don't indicate your race or ethnicity, and so a lot of this is done with modeling. But as we've done that modeling, we see that fewer than 50% of eligible Black voters are actually registered to vote, compared to 98% of eligible white voters. So if you're a white voter in Kansas, you're getting registered. And so we've got a real problem just right out of the gate, and making sure folks get registered to vote so they can actually go and participate.
Right.
No.
So I'm going to just repeat that.
Yeah.
You said that the registration numbers for the black community is less than 50%, but the white
Yeah.
community is over 90.
Yeah.
Well, over 90%. Okay. Just wanted to make sure I heard that correctly. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, voter registration is is something we really need to tackle, but we have to do it intentionally, right? If you're going to, I'm trying to say this without offending anybody who's done this in the past, but if we go like set up a table at the farmer's market, and we're not being intentional about who we're talking to, then we're probably just like in a crowd of people who are already registered to vote, right? Okay.
That's the people who go to farmers markets.
Yeah.
Okay, we're moving on. Next slide.
Yeah.
Turnout by race and ethnicity.
Okay, so this was last year in the general. So November 2022, that's a midterm election, right? A midterm means there's no presidential election on the ballot, but we have members of U.S. Congress running, folks at the State House are up for re-election or running for election. And turnout in midterms in Kansas typically hovers around 50 to 55%. So last year in November, and actually we have the primary on here too, which is interesting because turnout in last year's primary was super high.
Yeah.
Because we had that constitutional amendment regarding abortion on the ballot. So a lot of people came out for that. And so turnout was much, much higher than it normally is in a primary election. But in the November election, white voters turned out at 58%, compared to Black voters at 35%. So these are the ones who actually got registered. So once you're registered, 58% of white registered voters turned out compared to 35% of registered Black voters and 29% of registered Hispanic voters.
Yeah. And it's and we'll touch on this as we go on. I'm sure we'll make this point more than once. This idea of why is that even important? Yeah. Why is it important that the Black community votes? Why is it important that the Hispanic community votes, or the Asian community, or the fill in the blank community? But since I'm the African American affairs person, I'm like, why is it important that the Black community votes?
Yeah.
Or I mean, well, you can ask, or we can just discuss it. Yeah, go ahead. What would you say?
No, let's talk about it. I want to say first that voting is just one tool.
Yeah.
And it's not, and it will never be the end all be all. But it is a powerful tool that elected officials and candidates running for office use and look to often when they're trying to decide their policy agendas or who they're going to talk to or who they're going to target. You know, if they're going to poll and decide which issues to talk about or which issues are important to talk about on the campaign, they're going to poll likely voters, because we can't tell who you voted for, but we can tell whether or not you voted, which is important. Like, that's why I might get every single piece of political mail this campaign season, and my neighbor Susie might not get any. And she's like, wait, why'd you get all the mail? Like, you already know who everybody is. And that's because I vote and Susie doesn't. And candidates running for office know that. So I think just simply the numbers here, like elected officials and politicians and candidates look at those numbers and decide like how to structure their administrations or their campaigns.
Yeah, definitely. All right, turnout by age.
Turnout by age. Yeah, I mean, this is also something we hear about a lot, that older voters are voting at much higher rates than younger voters. This slide is fun to look at too, because I think having those primary numbers from last year in there are cool.
Definitely.
You see the 18 to 24-year-olds turned out at 41% in the primary last year, registered 18 to 24-year-olds. And normally in a primary, 18 to 24-year-olds would come out at like 10. And they came out at a much higher rate than they did in November, which is very cool. I think, I mean, it's just interesting. And I think will tell us a lot moving forward about how to engage younger voters. which I'm not.
I mean, yes, that turnout number for the youth population, the youth vote in the primary was astronomical. And it took a lot of work to get a lot of young people to turn out. The fact that the drop off was so precipitous is a little bit on the discouraging side to me, for any number of reasons that are beyond the scope of this 30-minute block that we have right now.
So you say discouraging, and I say there's opportunity there.
Yeah, I agree. I would say that there's opportunity there. But to your point, let's see. Oh no, I'm gonna back up one slide. To a point that you've often made is that because the voter turnout is so largely skewed towards white people, and then on this screen we see the voter turnout is so largely skewed towards older people. What that means, and I'm just stealing from things that you've said before in the past, is that we're handing over a lot of the decision-making power in our communities to one demographic of people.
Yeah.
And I live in Johnson County, which is a lot more diverse than I ever gave it credit for. And it's no Wyandotte County. But if a county has the type of diversity that it does, Douglas County, Shawnee County, then the people who are representing should, heck man, Seward County, Ford and Fayette, like the people who represent these different locations should start to represent the people who are actually there. So I think handing over the power of the vote just by not registering and not participating is something that I know the Voter Network is serious about changing that behavior. And I too am like, yeah, I'm all for it. Let's work on changing that behavior. So I know I'm stealing all your best lines, because you're not, and I should say you're nonpartisan, you're not for profit. So it's a 501c3,
right?
Nonpartisan. So you're not in here to tell people how to vote, but talk about what Voter Network does, sort of.
Yeah. And I just want to reemphasize that point you made. I mean, yeah, we're handing a lot of power to not enough people, right? Like the percentage of people who vote every single November in Kansas is less than 10% of registered voters, right? So it's a small amount of people who are making big decisions for us. So at the Voter Network, it's our core belief that we are not often or almost ever the right messenger to be encouraging new voters or talking to voters. We think those messages come best to people from the folks they know and trust. And so we also know that there's no like one answer for increasing voter turnout, or else we would have figured that out by now, right? Like the barriers that people face or the reasons they don't vote are real personal to people. It might just be like, there's nobody young on the ballot who looks like me. I'm like totally unmotivated, or, nothing, I haven't seen anything in my neighborhood change in years. And so like, I feel like they're just promising things they can't deliver. It could be apathy. It could be like stuff nationally looks toxic, so they don't want to do it. We think, one, can the Voter Network help solve in some way just the logistical barriers? So like not knowing who's on the ballot or where to vote shouldn't be the problem.
Right.
So we try to help solve for some of that with some of our tools and resources, but also we're trying to empower people to talk to their own communities and networks about voting, even if you don't feel like a political expert. We still want to encourage people to ask their friends to vote. So we started this project called Voter to Voter. It's really straightforward. It sounds a little overly simple. It's we're just asking people to talk to 10 of your friends or 15 of your friends who are not regularly voting and make sure they get there. And again, it's not about changing hearts and minds. It's about changing behavior. And so if you're not a regular voter, just hearing from someone could really dramatically increase the likelihood that you'll do it. I mean, it's like anything, right? Like they say, if you're going to go to the gym, find a buddy. If I'm doing something new and kind of intimidating, if I have a friend walk me through it, I'm much more likely to actually get it done. So we call all our volunteers ambassadors, and all of our ambassadors pick 10 friends and then get them across the finish line. But we also have teams. And so the ambassadors come in on teams. So the African American Affairs Commission has a team or could have a team, but it could be your book club, right? And then you could maybe everybody adopts 10 voters or finds 10 voters, and then you have a bigger number at the end. It kind of looks, I mean, from this graphic, it looks like a pyramid scheme, but the result is a better, more representative democracy, right?
It's a multi-level marketing. No. So I just want to clarify, the African American Affairs Commission does not have a team.
Oh, okay.
But Stacey Nell has a team, right?
Right.
So, and I have told the story several times to anybody who will listen, because I'm Team Voter Network. So ahead of the 22 election, I was like, all right, I'm gonna get a team. And I pulled 13 of my friends. I guess 2 don't count, because 2 of them were my mom and my husband. And I do know they vote a lot, because I'm always like, you need to go vote. You need to go vote. You need to go vote. Let's go. So, but I sort of used them as a control. I think it might be on the next slide. You might want to talk about this. Yeah. So I found people who were my friends, but my criteria was that they weren't necessarily on Facebook. So it's not like I thought that they might be sort of getting information from me just passively on Facebook.
Yeah.
So I tried to pick people who weren't on Facebook, and it was ahead of the primary. So quite frankly, I didn't care if they were I's, U's, or D's, but I also specifically tried to pick people who were, according to your tool, had not voted probably in 2 years. So, and I'll make this a little bigger, and you can walk through what's on the screen here.
Oh yeah. So we talked about earlier that it is public information whether or not you vote, not who you vote for, just whether or not you vote. It's the information that every candidate uses when running for office to decide who they're going to mail, for example. So we already talked about that. But it's powerful. It's public, but it's not super accessible. And we think it's powerful enough that we wanted to make it accessible and free for people to get to. And so we built our own tech. It's at a website called voter2voter.org. That's where you can create the teams and find the friends you're going to talk to. But we share like somebody's voting propensity, which just means how likely they are to vote on a pretty simple scoring system. That's a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So if you're looking up your friends and you look up Stacey, and she's a 404 voter, she has a little 4 next to her name. I already told you only 10% of registered voters will be 4s in this scoring system. So Stacey doesn't need help getting out to vote. But Bianca on this screen, who lives in Pittsburgh, is a 1, and Bianca's gonna need a little more help figuring out where to go and how to get there.
And so what does that 1 mean? It means that out of the last, how many?
4.
So she's voted 1 time out of the last 4.
Yeah. And so if you're we call them like 1 of 4 voters. Some people call them presidential voters. The most likely scenario is that Bianca comes out when there's a presidential election and then doesn't vote in midterms or local elections.
Right.
And, we've moved our local elections. They used to be in the spring, and they've moved them. So it's on the same schedule, which is kind of cool, because now we vote every August and every November in Kansas.
Right.
But we're in an odd year, a local election year. And turnout in these local elections is like 25% max.
Yes.
So you will find friends in here. If you're like, oh, everyone I know votes, you will find friends in here that aren't voting, at least in local level elections.
Right. And I agree. So when I pulled my team, my 13 people, and I specifically picked people who are 0, 1s, and 2s. So if I pulled a friend and then they were a 4, I was like, well, that person clearly,
they know what they're doing.
If they voted in the last 4 elections, they have voted in an off year election already. And then I specifically started texting them, since they were actually my friends. It wouldn't be strange for me to text them, as opposed to if a candidate texts them. It might be cool to get a candidate text, but it would be a number that they already recognize. And so I started with, hey, there's an election coming up. Let's get a plan to vote. That's it. Copy paste 13 times. Then it's like a week later. Hey, the election's getting a little closer. Do you know where your polling location is? Here's a link to find your polling location. Just a sentence.
Yeah.
Then like a week later, hey, early voting's going to start. And in Johnson County, we get a postcard that has all the early voting locations. So like I would take a picture of that postcard and attach it to the text. Hey, early voting starts like, next Saturday. Here's some early voting opportunities. Send it. Then like that Monday, hey, today's the last day early voting. Tomorrow the polls open at 7. Send it. So it didn't take tons of time for me to reach out to these people.
Like an hour a week, maybe?
Huh?
Like an hour a week, maybe?
I mean,
if
even, right? I think if even, because I would type the text once and then just copy paste.
Okay. Stacey, right? I want to know how people reacted. Were any of your friends like, stop bothering me, or like, why are you talking to me about politics? Or
no.
Yeah.
And I think part of it's because they were my friends, right? They already, like, if it's my friends, they already know that I'm involved in politics. And so I don't think any of my friends would be surprised if I texted them anything having to even remotely do with politics. And so I think it goes back to that slide that the messenger is as important.
Yeah.
What would take longer would be that someone might text back, oh, who's this person on my ballot? And so then I might go find them a website.
Yeah.
Right. Or it might be a couple people. I mean, I did get in some conversations back and forth, but they were never mad. They were just more like, how does this work? What do I do? Where do I go? And one person specifically got back to me afterwards saying, it really thanked me, saying that she had some anxiety around it. And this was a functioning adult. Right. So this person married with children, completely functioning adult, but had, for whatever reason, and I don't know, some anxiety around voting. So the fact that I just texted a photograph of the postcard saying there's early voting was all she needed to get that little bump.
I mean, we're in the no shame game here. I totally understand anxiety around voting. I mean, we've got so much going on. And then to like stop your day a couple of weeks before the election and be like, how do I even find out who these people are and what they stand for? That's tricky. A couple of things I want to say about the program. So if you signed up as a volunteer, your friends don't know that you've added them to your list. You can certainly tell them, but it's not like they get a notification or something. The Voter Network never asks for their contact information, so we never talk to those friends. You don't have to text people you don't like. I get that a lot. Like, what if I don't want to text Susie next door? And I'm like, then don't text Susie. It's really your program. But we also send out tips and tricks for how to talk to your friends and little sample text messages. So you could copy and paste from there. We also have a ballot guide. So when people ask you, like, who's on my ballot and what do they stand for? We developed a ballot guide. It's nonpartisan. You put in your address, everybody comes up. It's at ksballot.org. It's not live. It won't be live until the end of September. Also, the League of Women Voters has a really nice nonpartisan website, vote411.org. And so we send out all those links in a weekly email to kind of easy to digest. Like if someone's asking you a question, point them here. And that's been super helpful.
And then I think we've got some results, right? That's the best part about this.
Oh yeah. So we're 5 years into this. And the people that we talk to through this program, so just friends of our volunteers, are turning out at 20 and 30% higher rates sometimes than statewide averages. And I don't think I included this slide, but those who are vote, we see the biggest impact on. So like the last presidential election, with the people who were already like sort of good voters, they all came out in a presidential election. So the conversations we had with them like just moved the needle a little bit, or a couple of percentage points, but down with those people who had never voted. If they heard from a friend or family member or someone in their network, they voted like a 30% higher rate than someone who hadn't. So it's super impactful. It sounds almost too easy, I think, for people sometimes, like, oh, you just want me to talk to 5 friends or 10 friends. But it's really snowballing, and I like it. I like it for the results, but I also like it because I like encouraging people to have conversations about these things and bring us back to kind of civic dialogue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think,
or civil dialogue even.
Yeah. Just learning to talk to people again is a lost art. But there was a friend of mine, there's always, and I feel as though I know where you stand in this conversation. So I'm going to tread lightly, the yard sign conversation.
Oh.
And there was a friend who was all fired up to get a yard sign. And I'm like, well, I believe me, and you may not, well, you know this about me, but I'll say it publicly. I am team yard sign.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But however, I know yard signs don't vote. So what I was trying to tell this person who was like, I want to design a better yard sign, is like, okay, well, you could spend your time designing a better yard sign, or you could just text 10 of your friends to make sure that they vote. Yeah. And she was like, no, I think what we need to do is have a better yard sign. And I was like, as much as I love yard signs, and I love me a yard sign, actually, I think what I was tried so hard to talk her into saying, could you just text 10 of your friends? And she still had some hesitancy. Like she didn't quite understand. I may send her this so that she can see the data that shows that texting 10 of your friends. And again, I love me a good yard sign. I could practically wallpaper my basement with the yard signs that I have put in the past. But this is the whole good old fashioned direct voter contact. And when we reach out to like-minded people, then, and I definitely want to say this. I've said it before and I believe it strongly. I believe the Republican Party would be helped by having more Black people, young people, talk to them as well. So I think that's what makes us a functioning democracy, is if everyone who can participate participates.
Yeah.
That's the way, I know I've seen plenty of school board, city council discussion, debates where there's someone in the office, someone at the like the lectern yelling at the dais going, you work for us.
Yeah.
You work for us. We pay we pay taxes and you work for us. Well, part of that, I believe our part of that is that we need to vote because they do work for us. And so if we don't vote, then part of me is like, well, you don't get to complain because you didn't say anything about who was up there, because they do work for us. So we should pay attention to their hiring process, as it were.
Absolutely. Stacey, I have so much more data that I could share with you, and this is probably like another hour's worth of nerding out that we don't have to get into, but it's not just the yard sign, like all of those traditional campaign tactics that we see, even like the tried and true calling someone on the phone or having a conversation at their door, something where you're having a two-way conversation. Those things play an important role, but mostly on people who already vote.
Yeah.
And when they've been tested in the field, they don't work on people who don't already vote. There's something about just like identifying as someone who doesn't pay attention. You need a little extra personal attention to break through to that. That's why campaigns don't talk to them, because it's like too hard to get them to, you got to like change their mind and their behavior. I like to nerd out about this.
This just means I'll have to have you on again, and you come with all the data, and we can we can start with data and go straight to data. All right. Would you believe we're at 33 minutes? We are like well over. So I'm gonna cut us off here. But when this comes out in the show notes, I will drop all the links to all the things. I will make sure that everything is in there. And everyone, there's an election coming up, November 7th, general election. And this is an odd year election. So it's a lot of school board, city councils, mayors. In Johnson County, I know we have at least water board.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of all these municipal level races, but there are a lot of them, right? And in a presidential election, it's like you got president, and then, well, no, you don't even have governor. It's like you have president, and then like the state senate and the state house is up. But like in Johnson County alone, there are over 92 races.
Right.
It's a lot. So
that's a lot.
You and I can talk for a long time. We have. So I will stop here. But thank you so much for joining us, Lindsay. I probably will have you on again. It's just that simple.
I love being here, Stacey. This is fun.
And everyone, please make a plan to vote. Politicians pay attention to the people who pay attention to them. So we have to make sure that we as a community are paying attention to them as well. All right. I'm going to cut us off here. Everyone have a fantastic week. We'll see you next Monday.